Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Never find as long as you live.
The great Lou Rawls singing "You'll Never Find." This is a birthday bumper music selection from the beautiful Tracy Fontano, who was a friend of mine for 25 years. And she happens to be married to another one of my closest friends, Frank Fontano. But she's one of these people that perpetually has a smile on her face. I think back to every interaction we've ever had, and I can't picture anyone where she's not smiling. And so today's her birthday. Hopefully luck and good fortune smile upon her. All right. Good fortune is smiling upon me because I happened to come upon an essay in the Wall Street Journal the other day, which was really interesting. It was the headline was "Lessons Learned from a Fiery Decade in L.A." And the person who wrote this essay was Robert Kerbeck, who I have to confess I was unfamiliar with, but whose writing I've now become a fan of. He had written this book called Malibu Burning, the real story behind L.A.'s most devastating wildfire. He certainly strikes me as someone with an interesting perspective on what's happening now. Robert, thanks so much for joining me on the radio.
Oh, well, thank you, Frank, and thank you for those kind words.
Oh, sure thing. So, give Malibu Burning, really interesting book. I've ordered it, and I'm looking forward to reading it. It mixes investigative journalism with personal memoir. Very interesting writing style and a very interesting approach. And your situation is pretty interesting in that you're fighting to save your home during the Wildfire. For people that have not read the book, which I imagine is a good portion of the audience, although it was a very popular book and award-winning, I'm sure a lot of people did read it. Take us through what you went through. When was this, and what did you go through?
Sure. So the Wildfire was in 2018. My wife and I bought our house in the year 2000. It's an all-wood Victorian home. And so, as you can imagine, we were very concerned about our home surviving a wildfire. And we did a couple of steps, and one of them was a surfer friend of mine told me, you got to get this product called Phos-Check, and you spray it on your home, and it's going to give your home a fighting chance of surviving a wildfire. Now, I'm from Philadelphia. I lived in New York City for some years. I just assumed you called 911 when there was a wildfire. But he explained that these fires move so fast, they're so ferocious, that firefighters are very quickly overwhelmed, and there's really nothing that they can do, and you're basically on your own if you want to save your home. And sure enough, in 2018, the Woolsey Fire comes over the horizon. It's unbelievable. It's frightening. Fire nados, embers the size of softballs. My wife and I and our teenage child, we spray our house with this Phos-Chek and we evacuate. We get out of there, barely with our lives. And when we come home, our neighborhood, about 270 homes, 200 are burned to the ground. On our street, 17 of 19 are burned to the ground. And our all-wood Victorian is standing untouched.
Wow. My goodness. I can't imagine what that's like emotionally and everything else. So in your book, you detail how the Woolsey Fire affected people from all walks of life, from celebrities to everyday residents. We're seeing that now with the images that are coming across the TV screen. What stories stood out to you the most while you were writing that book?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there were so many stories and there were so many tragedies, from animals. A lot of times you don't think about, I've been in the fire zone in the Palisades for the last 5 days. And the first day I was there, there was an absence of sound. And all of a sudden I realized there were no birds. There were no barking dogs. There were no squirrels running around. There were no lizards on the ground. There was nothing, right? All the animals either evacuated like the people or they were killed, right? And one of the things with the Woolsey Fire that I wanted to document was all the pain and the trauma, but also to give people hope that we could all do better in the future, that agencies could do better, government officials could do better, and homeowners could do better. And, here we are 7 years later, 6.5 years later, and none of those things, very few of the recommendations that I made in the book, some of which are relatively easy. Spraying your house with Phos-Chek is not a complicated thing to do. It takes about half an hour. Power washes off if the fire doesn't come. And I can't tell you how few people, either came to my house. And of course, I've written about it and, every once in a while someone will email me and ask me about it, but really all things considered, not that many people. And so it's really been a kind of a bitter pill for me that here we have a fire that is now far more devastating. The number of homes lost, we lost about 2,000 homes in the Woolsey Fire, and we're going to lose they haven't even gotten to the count yet, but it's around 15,000 homes in these two fires, which occurred at the same time, one in Altadena and one in the Pacific Palisades.
At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight, talking with Robert Kerbeck. I'm going to link to his Wall Street Journal essay on my Facebook page. You can check it out, facebook.com/Morano fan. In terms of the importance of community cooperation, which you've stressed, give some examples of courage or kindness that you witnessed, that you found inspiring.
There's so many stories. In the Woolsey Fire, there were so many stories of people staying behind and not only saving their own home, sometimes their neighbor's home, and sometimes even entire communities by themselves. There was a couple, 80-year-old couple, Burl and Pat Dahlstrom, lived in Malibu, old-time Malibuites. He was retired battalion chief, and they were putting out fires with their feet, not bare feet, they had boots on, and buckets, right? Because one of the things, again, with most fires, not all fires, but with many fires, what happens is, and your audience is, more East Coast, and so maybe they don't understand how these fires work. And so what a lot of times happens is an ember lands on something, lands on a cushion on your back deck. That cushion catches on fire. That cushion catches your deck on fire, and that deck catches your house on fire. It's not often that it's a wall of flames that just decimates everything, which is what happened with this Palisades and these Altadena fires. But most fires, or many fires, if you're there and you put that one ember out, your house doesn't burn down. And if your house doesn't burn, your next door neighbor's house is much less likely to burn. And what's happened in this Palisades fire, and I can, audience, I'm sure many of them have been to Los Angeles. They've driven up and down the Pacific Coast Highway. The Pacific Coast Highway is gone. The Pacific Coast Highway is gone. The homes that lined the beach up and down the Pacific Coast Highway 90%, 80% of them are gone. And I was staggered by that. And when I was driving down the Pacific Coast Highway going through the fire zone, I've lived here now for 25 years, I was lost. I didn't know where I was because so many homes had burned. All the landmarks that you use to go, oh, I'm at the Octopus House. Oh, I'm at the Real Inn. Oh, all of these different things were gone. And so at one point I was so disoriented, I had to pull over and go, where am I? It was really, really frightening, and it's really disturbing. One of the interviews I had in the book, Malibu Burning, I interviewed 300 people, was with the deputy fire chief of L.A. County. And one of the things he said to me, he said that the Woolsey Fire was a once-in-a-100-years event, once in 100 years. And I said to myself at the time, no way. And I wrote it in the book. You'll read, if your audience reads the book, you'll see me reacting to his line there going, no. And here we are once in a 6.5-year event and now this fire is even far worse and deadlier than the Woolsey Fire. And then, of course, the other thing is now we're seeing fires in places that people didn't think could catch fire. Santa Monica almost caught on fire in this recent fire, right? So I think what we're seeing now is that all communities have to be better prepared. Homeowners need to, kind of take care of their own business, kind of clean up their own side of the street. I tell people you just can't have dry brush. You cannot have dead leaves. You've got to clear your gutters. You can't have a wood pile near your house, and when we get these high winds, you've got to be proactive. And all those cushions outside, you got to bring them in the house. You got to put them in the garage because, it just takes that one ember to land on something. And now all of a sudden you've got an out-of-control fire. Your house is burning down. Now your neighbor's house burns down. Now all the houses on your street burn down because embers were landing on flammable materials.
If you're just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. We're talking with Robert Kerbeck. His book is, he has a couple of books, but one of them is Malibu Burning, the real story behind LA's most devastating wildfire. I also just posted his Wall Street Journal essay, which I found really interesting, on my Facebook page. Robert, do you still live in Malibu?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I do.
How did the Woolsey Fire change Malibu as a community? Or has it changed Malibu as a community? Have the scars of that disaster healed, or are they still visible?
This is a great question. There are 2 homes on my street that are just being framed, just being rebuilt right now. One thing people don't realize is when you have, Malibu is a small city. Malibu is 10,000 people, right? So when you lose 400 homes, 500 homes in one day in a small town, rebuilding them is very hard because the planning department, the building department, they just don't have the staff. They don't have the experience to handle 500 homes. Now think about the Pacific Palisades now, and think about Altadena, right? There are so many homes that are lost. I just read an article from a journalist today whose home survived, and he was saying, boy, it's going to be really hard. Most of his homes were gone. Like our situation, very similar, where we were one of the few that survived, and he was saying, boy, it's going to be a really hard 2 years. I didn't have the heart to tell the guy it's not going to be 2 years for all those homes to be rebuilt. It's going to be 5 to 7 years. And so now you are a survivor, so theoretically that's good news, but now you're living surrounded by the remains of your neighbor's homes, and then you're in a full construction zone. And it's not one home, and we all know what it's like when you have one neighbor and their home's being remodeled, and there's trucks, and there's, the beep, beep, beep at 7 a.m. Now imagine hundreds of homes and hundreds of trucks and hundreds of beep, beep, beep. You've already got PTSD from this experience. You're already stressed out. You're already mourning your neighbor's losses because they're your dear friends, right? And your kids played together. And now you're in this really, really difficult situation. And that's what we went through. But it did bring our community closer together. Malibu has started its own volunteer fire brigade, which is really a great story. And it's a story in the book because the Malibu guys basically started it on their own without permission. They got fire engines without permission. They were just like, we're going to be prepared because we know the fire department gets overwhelmed and they can't help us. And so we're going to do it. And of course, the fire department was furious and they were, no, you can't do it. You can't do it. And these guys basically did it on their own. And it's one of the great chapters, one of my favorite chapters in the book about these guys. They got their own engine, they got their own water truck. And when the Woolsey fire came in, they pretty much saved their entire community.
Your essay highlights the environmental dangers of wildfires, like inhaling toxic materials from burned homes. How can public awareness about these hidden risks be improved? I know you've done your part by writing about it and asking people to pay attention. What else can be done?
The first thing is for homes not to burn down because, I was documenting one of the first days after the fire, these homes that are on PCH, the high tide is taking the remains of the homes and washing it into the ocean, right? So now it's not just land, it's not just air, it's not just us, it's not just the animals on the land, it's all the sea creatures now are impacted by the remains of our homes. So melted refrigerator, melted stereo, melted cars are now going into the ocean. And so there are so many things that we can do. I just mentioned one, gelling your home, right? And you don't have to stay and fight the fire. You gel your home and leave. You can gel your home 8 hours before. You can gel your home the day before, right? And you can put all the flammable things away inside your house. You can take the barbecue with the propane tank and put it in the garage. All of these things to give your home a fighting chance. But now when they rebuild these homes have to be hardened, right? And they have to build these homes with much more fire-resistant materials. They have to build homes that can stand up to these fires. So not an all-wood Victorian home like mine, steel home, concrete home, stucco home, homes that are basically able to withstand not a likely fire, but an inevitable fire.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for a Light and Fit remix. Like a crunchy storm of graham cookies, caramel pearls, and dark chocolate, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Light and Fit remix varieties with craveable flavors and up to 120 calories and 10 grams of protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See remixyogurt.com.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms. Really fascinating. So you've driven through fire-ravaged areas and witnessed the disorientation caused by the destruction of landmarks. How does that level of devastation shape a community's identity and their sense of, where they're living?
Well, look, I would love to give some good news here, and I'm going to try my best, Frank, but the city of Pacific Palisades is gone. I mean, the city is gone. In the Woolsey fire in 2018, we lost homes, right? We lost homes, but we didn't lose our businesses. And so in some sense, the city, and I live in western Malibu, and again, for your audience, Malibu is long and skinny. It's 21 miles long. And so, for lack of a better thing, there are kind of 3 sections. There's western Malibu, there's what I call mid-Malibu, central Malibu, and then there's eastern Malibu. This fire burned eastern Malibu and into Topanga, and then the Pacific Palisades, and came up against Santa Monica. The 2018 fire burned western Malibu, but we didn't lose the businesses. Pacific Palisades, everything is gone. All the businesses are gone. The hair salon is gone. The veterinary is gone. The dentist's office is gone. The theater is gone. The restaurants, with a few exceptions, are gone. So, for that community, that community has to start over. That's like a whole town is going to be rebuilt. And that's why I'm so adamant that the things I talked about in the book when it came out in 2019, and I fought hard to get that book out in a year. And if you know anything about the publishing world, it's very rare to get a book out that quickly. But it was really important for me to get that book out quickly so that people could go, okay, we got to do some things. We got to change some things. We've got to do this better. We've got to do that better. And I was shocked as kind as people were in the reviews of the book and reading the book and saying nice things about the book and being touched by a lot of the human stories in the book, there were very few changes made governmentally, agencies, cities, and even, unfortunately, homeowners. And I'm not saying that this fire would not have been this unbelievably destructive monster. There is no doubt. But, when we talk about mitigation, let's just say the fire was 10%. 10% of the homes didn't burn because people did X, Y, and Z, and fire department did X, Y, and Z, and the government did X, Y, and Z. Well, 10% of 15,000 homes, that's 1,500 homes that didn't burn. That is a lot of homes. And that's just a 10% improvement. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get that. It helped me out with my East Coast biased geography. How close are you from where you live to where these fires are? Are we talking about a short drive, a long drive, very close, not close at all?
15 minutes. 15
minutes. And are you smelling smoke or seeing anything firsthand?
I was, yes, absolutely smelling smoke, and I was down at the beach today. I finally took some time for myself because it's, as you can imagine, it's a really stressful experience. And I went down to the beach, and on my beach, which is 15 minutes away, there are burned pieces of wood from the burned homes down the coast.
What is the situation like now in terms of containment of these fires?
The fires are pretty contained now. I mean, they've got a great handle on them. The containment numbers always lag. So I didn't look at what they were exactly, for the most part today, but they're, somewhere in the 30s, 40% contained. As you can imagine, they're very conservative with those numbers because they don't want to give too high a number and give people a false sense of safety. And then these Santa Ana winds pick back up and they stir up embers. And then all of a sudden there's another, flare up or outbreak of fire in a different spot. So, they're being very cautious. And, of course, one of the things, it looks like the Altadena fire may have been started by the power lines of SE Edison, which is how most of these fires start. That's how the Woolsey fires start. SE Edison admitted responsibility and took blame for that. And it looks like that may have been the case again, which is really tragic because most of these major fires are started by the power lines from the utility providers going down. But the Palisades fire, they're thinking now that it was the result of, apparently there were some fireworks that went off in early January. They hit some brush. The fire department thought they put it out. And these winds were so ferocious, approaching 100 miles an hour, that they stirred up. I guess there was something in the ground that had some embers that were still, burning. And theoretically, right now, that's what it's looking like. And these embers got stirred up and started this horrific fire.
There's been a lot of criticism of the people in charge in California and in L.A., and that criticism takes many forms. Sometimes it's forest management. Sometimes it's criticism of the budget cuts that were made to the Los Angeles Fire Department. Sometimes it's blame for the current state of the hydrants or the reservoir. As somebody that's followed this situation pretty closely, do you think that criticism is fair? Or is that people trying to make a political argument out of something that really isn't a political argument?
Look, I think when you have a disaster, it's a disaster. It's a disaster for a reason, right? Things were not done. Things were not maintained. Things were not improved. Things were not upgraded. Things were not addressed. Things were not considered. So, yeah, I think everybody's got to take responsibility. Everybody, and that includes homeowners. And I can tell you that the LA fire chief, Kristen Crowley, I interviewed her for Malibu Burning. She was at the launch of my book. I wrote another essay about her, and in the Woolsey fire, she and her partner went up to her partner's mother lived in Malibu, and they went up to evacuate her on the day of the fire. But the mother's church group had gone in and taken her. She was elderly. And so Kristen and her partner get up to this community in Malibu, up in the hills, called Encinal Highlands. And it's, I think, 13 or 14 homes. And they get up there, and there's no one there. Now they're both firefighters. She's not the chief at the time. They're off duty, and Malibu was part of L.A. County, so that's the L.A. County Fire Department. Kristen's part of L.A. City Fire. So they were off that day. They went up to evacuate the mom. They got up there. There's nobody there, no homeowners, and they say, you know what, we're going to try to save the family home, and we're going to try to save all these homes. And Kristen and her partner, by themselves, with no engine, no helicopter, with garden hoses, saved every home in that community by themselves, these two women. And the only home they didn't save was because that home was being remodeled and the water had been shut off. So that home, they couldn't get any water to it. So I know she's a hero, and I know she's going through some tough times right now, but I just know what a great person she is and what a hero she is, and I really support her. But look, like I said, when you have a disaster, everybody's got to look in the mirror and go, I should have done better. I should have done some things differently. And next time I am going to do those things differently. And that's what we have to make sure, because after 2018 in Woolsey, not much was changed.
Do you feel that the media coverage of wildfires does justice to the scope of the destruction and the resilience of the people involved?
I think, look, there's a lot of coverage right now. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of coverage, but I'm here to tell you, I fought a wildfire. I lived through a wildfire. My neighborhood was decimated. And when I drove down there, I was, and I feel like I'm a pretty hardy guy. I was gutted. I was gutted. I just, it's incomprehensible. It's certainly going to go down as the most costly I think, disaster in American history. Now, part of that is because a lot of the homes burned are in Malibu and in the Palisades, and they're on the beach, and they're multi-million-dollar homes. But just still, 15,000 homes. It's going to, and I just hope and pray that the death toll doesn't go any higher, because it's already too high.
Lastly, obviously, a lot of people are going to be rebuilding. You've shared some stories of rebuilding after wildfires. What advice would you give to people that are beginning that process now?
I think you've just got to have expectations that it's going to take a lot longer than you think. It's going to take a lot longer than you think. And even though I know the city is doing a lot of things, and they're talking about exemptions and permit expediting, but we heard the same things in Malibu after the Woolsey fire. And like I said, my neighbors 6 years later are just rebuilding, right? So I do think this time it is going to be a little faster. But, when I mentioned that gentleman who wrote the article, I think his name is Bill Plaschke for the Los Angeles Times, he said 2 years. Bill, I hope you get your home back, and his home didn't burn. I hope your neighbors get their homes back in 2 years, but I don't think so. And I think people need to understand that. They need to have some patience. They need to make some preparations for where they're going to live over the next couple of years. And they need to rebuild a super hardened home and be very, very fire conscious with every decision that they make.
Well, Robert Kerbeck, I thank you for the time this morning. I hope people check out the book, Malibu Burning, and I hope they check out your essay in the Wall Street Journal. It's been great talking to you.
Oh, thank you, Frank, and thank you for spreading the word.
Absolutely. Thank you for the great work you're doing. If you want to comment on any portion of our discussion, you're welcome to give me a call, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.